With FD Smart, not Smart Alex. Is there any progress note on Senator Grassley's proposal that unannounced inspections by the US FDA would be brought back? There was a pilot for about a year, I understand, and that was discontinued during Obama's administration for some reason unknown at that.
About announcing inspections ahead
Unannounced
of time.
inspections.
Unannounced. I think that we're continuing to proceed with unannounced inspections locally, domestically.
I understand the U.S.
Yeah.
It is unannounced, but for the most part, foreign inspections, from my understanding, is always scheduled ahead of time.
Correct.
Except for that 1 year pilot, which was discontinued.
Correct.
Yeah, so we are trying to make it unannounced as much as possible. However, we have seen that with certain countries, it's not possible. We have to let the government know because we are coming, and it's about visa issues. And certain countries only give us visa for 3 months. Certain countries give it extended like 6 months, and we can go back to that country. So it's we are trying to work through that issues. We are seeing that, for example, India and China, we see a lot of firms are manufacturing products there, and they are coming from there. So we are trying to make as much as unannounced as possible. That's why we have local staff there. So even if we have an issue that is identified and we have to quickly go to that site, we don't have to really worry about visa issue, for example. Our local staff is there and they can easily go and inspect the facility. So yes and no, we are trying to make it as much as unannounced, but it's practically, we have seen that there are difficulties from certain countries, certain government, for example. So we haven't been 100% successful. But that's the goal that we want to be. And ORA can speak more on that because I am aware of this too, since we worked a lot on these two countries.
I'll catch you later. Thank you.
I'm Loganathan from Zifo R&D Solutions. So my question is for Rakhi Shah. So first of all, thank you for giving a lot of insights on pre-approval and post-approval inspection. So you mentioned about data integrity and data integrity audits. So as you said, that's a hot topic in the CGMP space. So what is FDA's view on risk-based data integrity remediation? So when we looked at the CGMP guideline from MHRA and EMA, they talk about the risk-based approach. So I want to understand what is FDA's perspective.
As I said, data integrity is a very hot topic and very big topic, right, by itself. So what we have a lot of conferences that we spoke about data integrity. And since your question is asking about risk-based approach, okay. So definitely we take risk-based approach as we take in all the other cases. Also, many of the data integrity cases that we have comes from informant. So whistleblower from the company that can get to us some of the information about some of the malpractices happening in the data integrity space, and we go and take a look at those kind of facilities. And this is more for Office of Compliance type of issue for pre and post-approval inspections, right? So we do look at the application, the data that is submitted in the application. And if we feel that very rarely we can really identify data integrity issues just by looking at the, sometimes we feel that, okay, this dissolution curves are superimposable on each other, or some BE data from humans is superimposable, which is kind of impossible. Then we will have something, and we may have some history about that facility. So there is no FMEA type of risk assessment done for data integrity at this point of time, but maybe Mahesh or Tara can speak more about that if they have some information. But from pre and post approval inspection point of view, it's very, very challenging to really understand from review perspective. And we are just reviewing the application and we are making decision. It's as opposed to when we have an informant case, then we know that there is something going on, and we have been very successful in those cases. However, just from review perspective, maybe Mahesh can take it.
Thank you.
Mahesh, did you have anything you wanted to add? stand up. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Sure, so that was a very interesting question. Rakhi, I think you did a great job setting the stage and giving a really robust answer. I think the only thing I would add to that is when we think about risk-based and kind of flexibility and assessment approaches, data integrity now is in a whole different stratosphere of the impact to assessments, the impact to product quality, where the flexibility gets a little more limited, right? Because what we want to make sure of is not only the information that we're looking at in the application, is it reliable? Is it relevant to the product the patient will get? Does it support our decision making as a regulatory agency? But also, how does it ensure that the facilities and the quality systems and the applicant are making the right decisions and can do this going forward in commercial production? Because if the data isn't reliable, then it's not just a regulatory problem. It's also the applicant issue. It's also the quality system issue that they're not in a position to make good decisions. So the risk-based sort of framework is a little sort of different when it comes to data integrity, because now we're asking, what are we really looking at? Do we have the ability to make good decisions? I will say, in the context of the application assessment, though, something to add is that there are levels as far as the data that we're looking at and how it impacts the decisions we're making. So, for example, we are really concerned when we don't have reliable information for the exhibit batches, for the release testing, for the stability information, for bioequivalence data, for clinical data, right? Because those now become more and more pivotal in the decisions we're trying to make in the application action and the post-approval space too. So the concepts that we've been talking about as far as risk-based, I want to make sure that we are using them correctly, and that when we talk about data integrity, that we first and foremost make sure that the data does have integrity, it is reliable, it is authentic, and then from there we can start thinking about how is it impacting decision making, both on the regulator side and on the applicant side. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mahesh.
It could be as well as unintentional. And we have seen sometimes we visit the farm, we do inspection, and the firm really doesn't understand how to control the signature or access levels, and that could lead to data integrity if they are doing it intentionally, but sometimes we find that it's just ignorance. So, but both types are considered as data integrity. So it's very difficult to just quantify, as Mahesh also spoke about data integrity in terms of risk assessment, but it has various levels, as I can say, to evaluate and make sure that we can approve right application.
Okay, microphone number 1, please.
Hi, this is Krishna from Invagen Pharmaceuticals. My question for Rakhi is, what is the timeline for receiving EIR report for local and international inspections? Because that typically is hindering my approval of the product.
Yeah, so CONOPS actually has some timelines defined, and we are trying to follow that. So as I said, that we have 483 we receive, and we have you have 15 days to respond. So similarly, we also have some timeline to send EIR as well as our recommendations also. So as soon as the inspection is done, we will let you know our initial field recommendation that comes immediately. Then you respond to us within 15 days. We do take a look at it, and investigator has about 30 days total to write EIR report, and they submit it to us, right? So within 60 days, I could say that's what we are targeting, but don't quote me for that, because there is a number in CONOPS, and we are trying to get to that. We will get there eventually, because we have like so many inspections going on and so many applications. So we are trying to follow that timeline, which is in CONOPS.
Thank you.
All right. Nice and close to the microphone for me, please. Microphone number 1.
My name is Namdi Wanchuku from RRD International. I represent smaller entities that are manufacturing primarily in the precision medicine, oncology, and immunotherapeutic spaces. They can be virtual companies with numbers from 2 people to 10 people. But we primarily use third parties for data quality and data analysis. And we disclose those in our submission packages. But in a situation where you are interested in looking at raw data, typically these entities do not disclose their algorithms that they use. They provide TFLs, et cetera. What would be your, I guess, recommendation for addressing that for any potential
So
investigators?
this is very similar to like a lot of DMF data, for example, is at the DMF site, right, located, and you do not have a third that kind of agreement to get the raw data. That's okay. In that case, you just identify that facility in your application, and we have authority to go to that facility as long as it's there in your application, right? So if the raw data you cannot get by any chance at your facility, and we see third-party manufacturing happening all the time. It's not only for small companies, but even big, larger pharma with hundreds and thousands of employees still after they commercialize the product, it goes into CRO or CMO. So we have an authority to go to the site, actual site of manufacturing or actual site of data analysis happening, and we can review it there. So it's not necessarily that all the data should be at your facility. Maybe you misinterpreted what I said, but whatever you have done at your facility, have the raw data available for that. Don't just ship it to warehouse, right, where it is very difficult for us to get those kind of data.
There's nobody behind you. You can go.
Does it add a level of complication if it's international service provider?
Because, but as long as you have provided that information in your 356H form, and we understand that your raw data will be available at international, we will schedule an inspection at international sites. So it's not a huge problem. It's just, again, logistic problem that we have to work with ORA in scheduling an inspection. And for pre-approval, we have a very short timeline, and I work in oncology also. So we are like OPQ is given only 3 months when we have a 6-month cycle. So we have to complete our inspection, have everything done, a recommendation ready by the end of 4th month. So it's very challenging sometimes, and doing international inspection takes a lot more than domestic, but we have ability to go out if needed, and we are going out and doing inspections. So it's not a big problem.
All right, let's go to our first online question, please.
Hello. Okay. At what point in the review timeline does the agency make a decision on whether the PAI will be done for the application? If you can just comment and elaborate on that.
We usually like to make a decision as early as possible, as soon as the application is submitted.
I just have a simple question. Allison, you mentioned having no prior history makes it a high risk for facility. For the first-time applicants, what can they do to minimize the severity, or what kind of information you would like to see from first-time applicants?
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you. You said, what could you do to
minimize the severity of the risk if the facility doesn't have a prior manufacturing history?
Well, again, you would do enough development data. If your development data is very strong, it doesn't lead to that many questions. And then if you take into account your facilities and equipment during that development data, you may not get a PAI. However, if we've never been out there for your drug type, dosage form, we're going to come anyway.
Thank you. I wanted to clarify that inspection report that somebody asked how many days. So we have actually 90 days. That's what is in CONOPS for FMD 145. So we are trying to meet that, not 60 days. So I apologize.
All right, we've got just a few more minutes. Let's go to another online question, please.
Okay. Does FDA ever perform PAIs at the sponsor company?
Can you clarify that sponsor company? We can do PAI at any manufacturing site or testing site or stability site that is listed in the application. So if the sponsor is manufacturing, yes, we will do a PAI.
Okay. and if there's any questions in the room, come on up to the microphone, but let's take our next online question, please.
Okay. At the moment of a PAI, should the packaging process be serialized completely, or is having the equipment validated enough?
Can you reiterate? Can you repeat the question?
At the moment of a PAI, when the PA is occurring, should the packaging process be serialized completely, or is having the equipment validated enough?
It depends. Now, if we're out there and we see you're having a lot of packaging issues, then it's going to point back to the fact, well, it wasn't appropriately qualified, right? Or you're having some issue with the packaging. If everything that you've shown us shows there are no issues, it's not going to be that much of a problem, because at the time that we come and do the pre-approval, you don't have to have done your process validation. But it's always a good idea to have all of your equipment qualified prior to your exhibit batches. Would you agree with that? Because if, granted, you don't have to have done your PPQ at the time of the PAI, it would still behoove you, in my opinion, this is my personal opinion, that if you're making batches and making decisions that's going to go toward your commercial product, you would want to make sure that your equipment is working within the parameters it's supposed to work. Typically, packaging is a low-risk operation when you've done it many, many times and there's no issues. But if there are issues, and we see issues while we're out on inspection, that we will address those deficiencies. And it's just a lot easier, in my opinion, that you qualify your equipment before you start using it to make your exhibit batches.
Okay. Microphone number 1, nice and close for me.
Hi, I'm Angelica from Ardelyx. I just have a follow-up question regarding the data integrity and I guess more related to review of raw data. So if you're using a CMO or a contract lab for actually the manufacturing and testing of your drug product, would you, I understand that they would also be inspected, right? But since the application holder is responsible for ultimately releasing the drug product, would you consider or would you expect the site to actually have raw data as part of releasing the drug product, or at least do some sort of qualification of the review of the raw data?
As I said earlier, right, third-party CMOs are very, very common, and we do see that a lot in our applications. So I would assume that you might have some kind of audit, internal audit that takes place at your CMOs or CROs for the raw data. It's not always possible to have all the raw data at applicant site, but as long as it's available at CMO, CRO site, and we do inspect those from our perspective in terms of data integrity. But a lot more you guys can do yourself, have internal audit take place and have that kind of agreement, because once I remember we went on an inspection and that was a CMO site, but they had no agreement in place with the applicant, so they did not share any raw data ever with the applicant. So it becomes a problem, you know, because applicant himself doesn't really understand the authenticity of their raw data. So have those kind of agreements, and that's really good for you guys. We, as a regulatory agency, we have an ability to go to that site and inspect and audit ourselves. But internally, if you want to, and we have seen that most of the companies do have that kind of agreement, but in certain cases they lapse. And not all the raw data is available from that CMO or CRO. Especially we see that if it's a very complex process, it's very important that you have access to all the raw data and you understand, you trend your data, because CMOs are actually just manufacturing. They might not be trending all the data that they are seeing OOTs or OSs. So it's really useful.
Hera, did you have something you wanted to add?
I did. I think that's a great response, Rakhi. And I think I heard another element of the question as well. I just wanted to make sure that when it comes to outsourcing and contract manufacturing, there are GMP requirements that are expected by all the entities that are involved. And there are certain responsibilities that cannot be sort of given away through contracts and other agreements. So for example, release of the results or release of the batches that a contract manufacturer is performing, that's their responsibility. They may also, like the applicant, or may also be performing their own batch release, but that is part of the inherent responsibilities of the manufacturer or lab.
And that is all the time we have for questions. Please help me thank our panel for their presentations and their answers.